Growing up in our family, I was always labeled the responsible one. While my sister Sarah basked in the role of golden child who could do no wrong, I was the invisible force ensuring everything actually worked. Sarah was the dreamer, the artistic soul, the princess who deserved the world handed to her on a sterling silver platter. I was the one scrubbing that platter until it gleamed. Our family dynamics had been established early. Sarah was 18 months older than me, born with the kind of effortless charm that made adults smile and forgive any transgression. She had thick auburn hair that curled perfectly without effort, wide green eyes that sparkled when she laughed, and an infectious personality that drew people to her like moths to flame. Teachers loved her creativity, friends adored her spontaneity, and our parents beamed with pride whenever she entered a room. I, on the other hand, was practical. I had straight brown hair that required effort to look decent, sensible brown eyes, and a calm demeanor that adults appreciated but rarely celebrated. While Sarah painted murals in her bedroom and wrote poetry, I organized my schoolbooks alphabetically and maintained detailed calendars. When Sarah forgot her homework, I reminded her. When she lost her keys, I found them. When her creative projects needed actual execution, I handled the logistics. This pattern followed us into adulthood. Sarah pursued a marketing degree, landed a position at a trendy boutique agency, and spent her days crafting campaigns for lifestyle brands. Her Instagram feed was a carefully curated collection of coffee shop meetings, networking events, and weekend getaways with her photogenic friend group. I studied business administration, worked in operations management for a mid-sized company, and spent my days solving problems that kept businesses running smoothly. When Sarah announced her engagement to Marcus Wellington III at last year's Christmas dinner, the family practically exploded with joy. Marcus was everything our parents had ever dreamed of for their beloved daughter. Harvard Law graduate, junior partner at a prestigious firm, member of the country club, heir to old Connecticut money. His family owned properties across New England, maintained memberships in exclusive social circles, and had their name engraved on buildings at prestigious universities. Finally, Dad had said, raising his wine glass in a toast, someone truly worthy of our Sarah. The wedding planning began immediately, with Sarah diving into Pinterest boards and bridal magazines with characteristic enthusiasm. She envisioned an elegant affair that would impress Marcus's distinguished family while showcasing her impeccable taste. The guest list quickly expanded to 200 people, including Marcus's extensive family network, business associates and social connections. "This needs to be absolutely perfect," Mom declared during our first family planning meeting in January. "The Wellington family will be judging everything. We need to prove that Sarah comes from a family that understands quality and sophistication." Sarah nodded enthusiastically, scrolling through photos of million-dollar weddings on her phone. "I want it to be timeless and elegant. Think old-world romance meets modern sophistication. Nothing too trendy or cheap-looking." When the conversation turned to actual planning logistics, everyone's eyes naturally turned to me. "You're so organized, Jenny," Mom observed. "You have such excellent attention to detail. Sarah needs someone she can trust completely to execute her vision." Sarah beamed at me from across the table. "You know my taste better than anyone. I can focus on being the perfect bride while you handle all the coordination work. It'll be like the ultimate sister collaboration." The collaboration part sounded promising until I realized it meant I would handle every aspect of planning while Sarah approved or rejected my suggestions. The scope of work was staggering: venue research and booking, catering coordination, florist arrangements, photographer and videographer scheduling, invitation design and mailing, transportation logistics, accommodation blocks for out-of-town guests, rehearsal dinner planning, day of timeline coordination and countless other details. "It's really the perfect situation," Mom continued. "Sarah's so busy with her demanding career, and Marcus is in the middle of that huge corporate litigation case. You're between positions anyway, so you have the time to really focus on making this spectacular." Between positions. That's how my family described my recent departure from a toxic workplace where I'd been severely underpaid, overworked, and passed over for promotions despite consistently exceeding performance metrics. I'd carefully saved money for months to afford a proper job search period, but to my family, unemployed simply meant available for unpaid wedding labor. "Think of it as your wedding gift to Sarah," Dad suggested with a smile. "Instead of buying something expensive that she might not use, you're giving her something priceless: your expertise and dedication." 6 months before the wedding, I threw myself into planning with professional intensity. I created detailed spreadsheets comparing venues, vendors, and pricing options. I researched dozens of potential locations before finding Elmwood Manor, a stunning historic mansion with gardens that could accommodate 200 guests for both ceremony and reception. The venue was booked solid for the next 18 months, but I called weekly for 3 months until a cancellation opened up Sarah's preferred date. I spent weeks taste-testing catering menus from top-tier providers, comparing everything from appetizer presentations to dessert options. I negotiated contracts, coordinated delivery schedules, and arranged special dietary accommodations for the growing list of guests with specific requirements. Each vendor required multiple meetings, site visits, and detailed coordination to ensure seamless execution. Sarah would breeze in occasionally to approve or reject my carefully researched suggestions, usually while multitasking on her phone or rushing to another appointment. "The flowers need to be more romantic," she'd announce after I'd spent weeks researching florists and creating detailed arrangement proposals. "And I've changed my mind about the color palette. I want something more sophisticated now." Each change cascaded through every vendor relationship, requiring new proposals, revised contracts, and additional coordination meetings. When I mentioned the extra costs these changes incurred, Mom waved away my concerns. "Budget isn't the primary consideration here. Sarah's happiness and the family's reputation are what matter." 3 months before the wedding, my workload had intensified to essentially a full-time job plus overtime. I was spending 60 to 70 hours per week on wedding-related tasks, coordinating with vendors, managing the guest list, and handling the constant stream of decisions that required immediate attention. Meanwhile, Sarah enjoyed her bridal shower events, bachelorette party planning, and romantic weekend getaways with Marcus. "You're absolutely incredible at this," Sarah's maid of honor, Jessica, told me after observing my coordination during a venue walkthrough. "Seriously, you should consider becoming a professional wedding planner. You have such a gift for managing all these details." But I wasn't being compensated like a professional. I was expected to absorb all associated costs: gas for constant vendor meetings, increased phone bills from hundreds of coordination calls, meals during long planning days, and parking fees for venue visits. When I hesitantly mentioned reimbursement for these mounting expenses, Dad looked genuinely annoyed. "Family doesn't charge family," he said firmly. "This is what sisters do for each other. Besides, you're gaining valuable experience you could use professionally later." 2 months before the wedding, Marcus's family became directly involved in the planning process. His mother, Victoria Wellington, was a formidable woman accustomed to getting exactly what she wanted in all circumstances. She had opinions about every aspect of the wedding and wasn't shy about expressing them through a series of increasingly demanding requests. She wanted the entire menu revised to accommodate her dietary preferences and those of several Wellington family members. She insisted on additional floral arrangements for the ceremony space, premium liquor options for the bar service, and upgraded linens for all reception tables. Each request came with the expectation of immediate implementation. "Handle whatever Mrs. Wellington needs," Mom instructed after Victoria's latest round of modifications. "We absolutely must make an excellent impression on Marcus's family. Their opinion of us will affect Sarah's future happiness." Victoria's requests required renegotiating multiple vendor contracts, sourcing specialized items on short notice, and coordinating with suppliers who were already stretched thin. When the additional costs exceeded $15,000, Victoria looked at me with expectant satisfaction. "I'm sure Sarah's family can handle these small enhancements," she said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "After all, we want this to be truly memorable." Small enhancements. $15,000 in additional expenses that somehow became my responsibility to coordinate and my family's obligation to fund. When I tried to discuss the budget implications with Sarah, she was dismissive. "Just figure it out," she said, not looking up from her wedding dress fitting appointment. "Mrs. Wellington's happiness is crucial for my marriage. Do whatever she wants." 1 month before the wedding, Sarah had a complete emotional breakdown about the bridesmaid dress situation. She'd changed her mind about colors 3 times, and now the dresses needed to be completely reordered with expensive rush shipping. The 6 bridesmaids were frustrated, the seamstress was overwhelmed, and somehow everyone expected me to solve the crisis. "This is your responsibility," Sarah sobbed during her latest meltdown. "You're supposed to make sure everything is perfect. I shouldn't have to worry about these kinds of problems. That's why you're handling the planning. I spent the next week working 18-hour days coordinating emergency dress orders, arranging multiple fittings at different locations, and managing 6 increasingly irritated bridesmaids who blamed me for the chaos. When 2 bridesmaids threatened to drop out of the wedding party entirely, I had to personally call each of them, apologize for circumstances beyond my control, and promise that everything would be resolved smoothly. 3 weeks before the wedding, disaster struck when Elmwood Manor's head chef quit without notice following a dispute with management. The replacement chef wanted to completely overhaul the menu we'd spent months perfecting, which meant new tastings, revised contracts, updated dietary accommodation lists, and coordination with a kitchen team that had no familiarity with our specific requirements. "Just handle it," Sarah said when I tried to involve her in crucial menu decisions. "You know what I like better than anyone. I completely trust your judgment on food choices." But when the revised menu proposals arrived, reflecting the new chef's culinary style and available ingredients, Sarah hated everything. "This isn't what I ordered at all," she complained, reviewing the options with obvious distress. "The chicken preparation is too simple, the vegetarian options look boring, and where's the signature seafood course I specifically requested?" I carefully explained that the seafood course had been eliminated due to the chef change and budget constraints created by all the previous modifications, but Sarah wasn't interested in explanations or compromises. "Figure it out," she demanded, her voice rising with stress. "That's exactly why you're handling this wedding planning. I shouldn't have to deal with these problems." 2 weeks before the wedding, the floral supplier called with devastating news. Their main growing facility had suffered significant flood damage, and approximately half of Sarah's elaborate flower orders were simply unavailable. This included the white peonies and garden roses that formed the foundation of every centerpiece, bouquet and ceremony decoration. I spent the next 3 days making frantic calls to every florist within a 100-mile radius, desperately trying to source replacement flowers that would maintain Sarah's vision. The few suppliers with adequate inventory charged premium emergency rates, and many couldn't guarantee the exact varieties Sarah had originally selected. When I finally located replacement flowers, the total cost was 40% higher than our original quoted price. Sarah was absolutely furious when I explained the situation. "Why didn't you have backup plans for this?" she demanded. "This is basic wedding planning 101. You should have anticipated potential problems and had alternatives ready." I had anticipated problems. I'd built contingency plans into every aspect of the wedding coordination. But no amount of planning could have prevented a natural disaster at the flower farm or predicted the sudden resignation of the venue's head chef. 1 week before the wedding, Marcus's best man called with another crisis. 3 groomsmen had experienced significant weight changes and needed completely new tuxedo sizes. The formal wear shop required 48-hour minimum notice for alterations, and the measurements needed to be absolutely perfect for wedding photography. I personally drove to collect all 3 groomsmen, coordinated emergency fitting appointments, and arranged rush alterations that cost triple the normal rate. When one groomsman decided he didn't like the originally selected tuxedo style and wanted something different, I spent an entire afternoon negotiating with the shop for last-minute replacements while maintaining the cohesive wedding aesthetic Sarah demanded. 5 days before the wedding, the luxury transportation company called with more bad news. One of their premium buses, reserved for bridal party transportation, had suffered mechanical breakdown and wouldn't be repaired in time. They could provide a replacement vehicle, but it was smaller and less elegant than what we'd originally ordered for the elaborate transportation schedule I'd coordinated. Sarah's reaction was pure hysteria. "Everything is falling apart," she cried, pacing around her apartment in panic. "This is supposed to be the perfect day of my life. Why can't you handle these simple coordination issues?" Simple coordination issues. 6 months of unpaid full-time work managing hundreds of interconnected details for her dream wedding, and every unexpected crisis was somehow my failure to handle simple problems. 3 days before the wedding, I was surviving on approximately 4 hours of sleep per night, managing constant vendor confirmations, resolving last-minute guest accommodation issues, and trying to calm Sarah's escalating anxiety. My phone rang continuously with questions, problems, and requests that demanded immediate attention and creative solutions. "You look absolutely terrible," Mom observed when she saw me during the rehearsal dinner preparations. "Maybe you should get some rest before the big day." Rest. I hadn't experienced a complete day off in 6 months. I'd sacrificed job interviews, social relationships, personal interests, and my own mental health to ensure Sarah's wedding would be flawlessly executed and memorable for all the right reasons. The rehearsal dinner itself was a preview of family dynamics. Sarah gave a heartfelt speech thanking everyone who'd contributed to making her dream wedding possible. She thanked her bridesmaids for their unwavering support, Marcus's family for their generosity and welcome acceptance, and our parents for their love, guidance, and financial contributions. She never mentioned my name once. After the rehearsal dinner, I sat alone in my car in the restaurant parking lot, staring at my phone screen displaying 17 new messages about wedding day logistics. Tomorrow's schedule required me to arrive at the venue by 6 a.m. to oversee setup coordination, manage all vendor arrivals, coordinate bridal party preparation timelines, and handle any crisis that inevitably arose. For 6 months I had given everything, my time, energy, expertise, and sanity, to make Sarah's wedding absolutely perfect. I'd absorbed financial costs, managed incredible stress, sacrificed personal opportunities, and dedicated my life to ensuring her happiness. And to my family I remained completely invisible, just the reliable person who handled things so everyone else could enjoy themselves without worry. I opened my laptop and began systematically transferring information. I sent comprehensive vendor contact lists to the venue coordinator, forwarded all confirmation emails and timeline documents to Mom's email address, and created detailed instruction packets for Sarah's maid of honor. Then I composed a brief message for the family group chat. Emergency situation has arisen. All vendor information has been forwarded to Mom and Jessica. Everything is organized and ready for tomorrow. At 4 a.m. on Sarah's wedding day, while she slept peacefully in her luxury hotel suite dreaming of her perfect day, I was checking in for a flight to Bali. I'd used the money carefully saved for job searching to book this escape, deciding that my mental health and self-respect were worth more than staying to be invisible at another family event where my contributions went unacknowledged. I turned off my phone as the plane pushed back from the gate. Sarah's wedding was scheduled to begin at 4 p.m. Technically, everything was prepared. The venue coordinator had detailed timelines, vendors had specific instructions, and the maid of honor possessed emergency contact information. Everything was ready except for the person who'd spent 6 months orchestrating every detail to ensure perfection. According to the increasingly frantic messages I eventually received when I briefly turned my phone back on days later, chaos had indeed erupted exactly as I'd anticipated. Without my presence to coordinate and problem solve, vendors arrived at conflicting times with different setup instructions. The florist delivered centerpieces to the wrong entrance while the catering team blocked the main driveway with their service trucks. Jessica, the maid of honor who'd assumed wedding day coordination involved looking pretty and holding bouquets, was completely overwhelmed by vendor questions and timeline management responsibilities. Mom, who'd remained deliberately uninvolved in planning details, couldn't answer specific questions about arrangements, backup plans, or vendor requirements she'd never bothered to learn. Sarah's perfect wedding transformed into an expensive comedy of errors that would become family legend for all the wrong reasons. The ceremony started over an hour late because nobody knew how to properly connect the sound system. Half the elaborate centerpieces never made it to reception tables because the florist couldn't locate anyone with authority to confirm placement instructions. Cocktail hour appetizers were delayed because the catering team couldn't find the correct serving areas in the venue's complex layout. The professional wedding photography, intended to capture Sarah's magical day for posterity, instead documented her obvious stress, guest confusion, and Marcus's family's barely concealed disappointment with the disorganization surrounding what should have been a sophisticated celebration. But I wasn't there to witness any of the disaster. I was watching a spectacular sunrise over ancient Balinese temples, finally experiencing peace after months of coordinating other people's demands and expectations. When I finally checked my messages 3 days into my trip, I discovered dozens of increasingly desperate texts from Sarah, Mom, and Dad. The messages ranged from furious accusations about my selfish abandonment to pleading requests for explanations about vendor arrangements they couldn't figure out how to manage. Sarah's message was particularly revealing. "You completely ruined my wedding. Everything fell apart without you there to fix problems. How could you do this to your own family? Without me there to fix problems." After 6 months of being treated as invisible, I'd finally been noticed, but only when my absence created difficulties for everyone else. I turned my phone back off and spent 2 blissful weeks exploring Bali's incredible temples, pristine beaches and rich cultural heritage. For the first time in months, I slept peacefully through entire nights without anxiety dreams about vendor conflicts. I read novels, took photography workshops, and remembered what it felt like to have personal interests beyond managing other people's events and expectations. When I finally returned home, the family drama had reached absolutely epic proportions. Sarah refused to speak to me directly, Mom had chosen Sarah's side completely, and Dad alternated between disappointed lectures about family loyalty and awkward attempts to mediate the growing conflict. According to detailed family reports, the wedding had been a complete disaster, and several prominent Wellington relatives had made pointed comments about our family's apparent inability to organize sophisticated events. "You made our entire family look incompetent in front of people who matter," Dad said during our first face-to-face conversation. Victoria Wellington specifically asked Marcus whether our family always handles important events so poorly. Victoria Wellington, who'd contributed $15,000 worth of last-minute changes but zero actual labor, had somehow become qualified to judge our family's competence based on a wedding I'd planned entirely by myself until the moment I chose to prioritize my own well-being. "You could have stayed for just one more day," Mom pleaded during one of her guilt-laden phone calls. "Sarah needed you more than ever." Sarah had needed me for 6 consecutive months. She'd needed my time, expertise, stress management abilities and problem-solving skills. She'd needed me to absorb costs, handle vendor conflicts, sacrifice personal opportunities, and dedicate my entire existence to her perfect day. But she'd never needed to acknowledge my contributions or treat me like valued family instead of unpaid hired help. The aftermath continued for months. 6 months after the disastrous wedding, Sarah and Marcus announced their divorce. According to family gossip, Victoria Wellington had never recovered from the embarrassment of the chaotic wedding and spent their entire Caribbean honeymoon criticizing Sarah's family's inability to execute proper social events. The marriage, apparently built more on image management and family approval than genuine partnership, couldn't survive the social embarrassment and ongoing family tensions created by the wedding disaster. "Maybe if you'd stayed to help coordinate everything properly," Mom suggested during one of her periodic guilt trip phone calls, "their marriage might have turned out differently." Maybe. Or maybe Sarah might have learned that having a perfect wedding doesn't guarantee a perfect marriage, and that treating family members like unpaid servants creates resentment that lasts much longer than expensive flowers and catered meals. I never offered to plan another family event again. When Dad's 60th birthday approached the following year, and Mom began dropping subtle hints about my natural event planning talents, I politely declined and immediately booked a vacation to Iceland instead. The pattern was clear. I would not be returning to the role of invisible family coordinator. The months that followed my strategic wedding day disappearance brought unexpected revelations about family dynamics I'd never fully recognized. Without me automatically stepping in to handle logistics and problem-solving, other family members were forced to confront their own capabilities and limitations. Dad's birthday party, ultimately organized by Mom and Sarah working together, was a modest affair at a local restaurant that required minimal coordination. Nobody complained about the simplicity because nobody wanted to take responsibility for anything more complex. Sarah's post-divorce period was particularly illuminating. Suddenly single and facing the reality of managing her own life without Marcus's family connections or my background coordination, she struggled with tasks she'd always taken for granted. Planning her apartment move required her to research moving companies, coordinate schedules, and handle logistics she'd never needed to manage independently. The experience was clearly frustrating for someone accustomed to having others handle such boring details. During one awkward family dinner 6 months after my return from Bali, Sarah made an unexpected comment that revealed how much she'd learned from the wedding disaster and its aftermath. "I guess I never really understood how much work goes into coordinating events," she admitted quietly, not quite meeting my eyes. "Everything always seemed to just happen when you were involved." It wasn't an apology exactly, but it was the closest thing to acknowledgement I'd ever received from her about the 6 months of unpaid labor I'd contributed to her dream wedding. Mom's perspective also evolved gradually. As she became more involved in coordinating family gatherings without my automatic participation, she began expressing frustration about vendor communications, schedule management, and the constant decision-making required for even simple events. "I don't know how you kept track of all these details," she said after struggling to coordinate a basic family barbecue. There are so many things to remember and organize. Dad, meanwhile, seemed to have gained new appreciation for the complexity of event management after witnessing the wedding disaster firsthand. His criticism of my wedding day departure softened over time, replaced by what seemed like grudging respect for the organizational skills he'd previously taken for granted. Maybe we relied on you too much, he said during one of our slowly healing conversations. We just got used to things being handled smoothly and forgot how much work that actually required. The most significant change was in how family members approached future events and expectations. No longer could anyone assume that complex coordination would simply materialize without effort, planning, and appreciation. Family gatherings became smaller, simpler affairs that multiple people contributed to organizing rather than elaborate productions requiring months of unpaid labor from a single person. My own life transformed dramatically during this period. Free from constant family obligations and expectations, I was able to focus on my career search properly. Within 3 months of returning from Bali, I'd landed a position as operations director at a growing technology company that valued organizational skills and paid accordingly. My wedding planning experience, ironically, had provided me with project management expertise that translated perfectly to coordinating complex business initiatives. More importantly, I'd learned to establish boundaries and communicate my value clearly. When colleagues or friends requested help with personal projects, I was able to offer assistance while maintaining limits on my time and energy. I no longer automatically said yes to requests that required extensive unpaid work, and I developed the confidence to negotiate fair compensation for my expertise. The wedding planning industry experience also opened unexpected professional opportunities. Several co-workers who learned about my background approached me for paid consulting on their own wedding planning, and I discovered I could earn excellent hourly rates helping people coordinate vendors and manage logistics. The difference between being paid professionally and being expected to work for free created a completely different dynamic where my expertise was valued and appreciated. A year after the wedding disaster, I received an unexpected phone call from Jessica, Sarah's former maid of honor. She was getting engaged and wanted to hire me as her professional wedding coordinator, offering to pay market rates for services I'd provided Sarah for free. After seeing what happened at Sarah's wedding, she explained, I realized how much skill and effort real coordination requires. I want to hire someone who actually knows what they're doing. I accepted the project and discovered how much more enjoyable wedding planning could be when clients appreciated my expertise and compensated my time appropriately. Jessica's wedding was flawlessly executed, stress-free for everyone involved, and resulted in several referrals to other couples who'd witnessed the successful coordination. 2 years after my strategic disappearance, our family relationships had reached a new equilibrium based on more realistic expectations and mutual respect. Sarah and I maintained cordial but distant contact, with both of us understanding that our dynamic had permanently changed. She no longer expected automatic assistance with her projects, and I no longer felt obligated to provide unpaid services to family members who didn't appreciate their value. Mom and Dad gradually adjusted to the reality that family events required genuine collaboration and planning rather than relying on one person to handle everything invisibly. Their requests for help became actual requests rather than assumptions, often accompanied by offers to share costs and responsibilities. The most powerful lesson from the entire experience was understanding the difference between being helpful and being taken advantage of. Helping family members occasionally with projects they appreciate is generous and loving. Consistently providing extensive unpaid services while being treated as invisible and unimportant is exploitation, regardless of family relationships. My strategic wedding day disappearance taught everyone in my family exactly how much they'd been depending on services they'd never bothered to value or acknowledge. Sometimes the most effective way to demonstrate your worth is through strategic absence, showing people what life looks like without your contributions rather than continuing to provide them while being taken for granted. Sarah's wedding photos remain a perfect illustration of what happens when people expect perfection without appreciating the effort required to create it. 200 guests looking confused and frustrated, vendors standing around uncertain of their responsibilities, and a bride learning that dreams require more than expectations. They require gratitude for the people who transform those dreams into reality. The empty kitchen I left behind on Thanksgiving morning 3 years later, when the family again expected me to cook for 30 people alone, reinforced the same lesson. My family finally understood that appreciation isn't just polite. it's essential for maintaining the relationships that make family gatherings possible in the first place.